This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
US, UK brace for soaring death tolls as COVID-19 pandemic bears down. 51 African countries confirm over 9,000 coronavirus cases. And we'll look at how Uganda is battling a new swarm of locusts from Kenya. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers, and here with the latest in your business news is Arama.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in business news. Global oil prices fall after the OPEC Plus meeting is called off. And a pet shop in Nigeria has seen a boom in rabbit sales during the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll explore why that's happening a little later in the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Hannah.
Thank you so much, Arama. We begin with news on the COVID-19 pandemic. The global death toll has surpassed 70,000. The total number of confirmed cases worldwide now stands at 1.2 million. Cases in the U.S. have surged to over 337,000, more than a quarter of the global total. The number of deaths there is approaching 10,000. Almost half of all cases worldwide of COVID-19 are in Europe, with Spain and Italy the worst hit. Italy reported 525 new deaths on Sunday, the lowest for the past 2 weeks. Iran is the hardest hit in the Middle East, reporting over 60,000 confirmed cases. The Chinese mainland reported 39 new infections on Sunday, most of them imported. Well, Africa continues to record a rise in COVID-19 cases, this despite governments taking a stronger stance to protect their citizens from contracting the virus. There are currently 51 African countries with over 9,000 cases. Most countries have imposed a partial lockdown, nighttime curfews, and banned public gatherings to help stem spread of the disease. North Africa has so far registered more than 4,200 cases and over 300 deaths. For more on the status of North Africa, here's CGTN's Adel El-Mourouhi.
All North African countries, Hannah, have imposed partial curfew to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on the public. Egypt's expires on Tuesday, with expectations that it will be extended. With 247 cases declared cured, Egypt has the highest recovery rates in the region. The highest infections rate so far is in Algeria, which has just received medical supplies from China. It's the first batch of preventive tools and testing kits, part of an Algerian request of supplies worth about $5 million. Lifting COVID-19 risks of correction facilities, Moroccan King Mohammed VI have pardoned more than 5,600 prisoners, while Tunisia is bracing for a wave of layoffs, especially at small and medium enterprises, as the virus hits its economy hard. Fears on migrants in Libyan detention centers are increasing. The divided country has only reported 18 cases. With little coordination among its governmental bodies, there could be more undetected cases. Overall, Hannah, all North African nations are still in stage 2 of COVID-19 infection, which means that all cases could be traced back to a source of infection. But with the number of daily cases rising significantly, the region could be on the verge of community transmission. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Elsewhere, the southern African region is on lockdown in a drive to limit and eradicate COVID-19. It's having more success in some countries other than others. Angela Coppola reports.
In Namibia, their state of emergency has been in place since the 17th of March. 2 regions are in 21-day total lockdown at the moment. Meanwhile, on the economic front last week, a $450 million economic stimulus package was unveiled. In Botswana, the total lockdown means that only essential services people are allowed out. The authorities moved early there. In Lesotho, the country went into national lockdown on 1 April, with reports emerging that some police are being a little heavy-handed in dealing with transgressors. Eswatini has been in partial lockdown since the end of March, with people allowed out to shop for food and medicine only. In Zimbabwe, they went into national lockdown last week, But the anxiety there among citizens is that the healthcare system is in fact almost non-existent. And with high unemployment, food shortages will be an issue. We're already hearing reports about heavy-handed police activity there. In Mozambique, the state of emergency appears to be mostly ignored by market stall operators, bar owners, minibus drivers and bike taxis. Meanwhile, there are plans afoot, should I say, to move prisoners out of the overcrowded prisons. In South Africa, lockdown appears mostly being adhered to, except in the high-density suburbs and townships. Taxi transport rules have been relaxed a bit, but the infection rate continues to increase. Mobile testing vehicles have been dispatched, that's as of Monday, so testing rates should climb. The region is mostly in lockdown with cross-border traffic limited to goods only, no people either way. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, in West Africa, the latest figures show that there are over 1,700 confirmed cases of COVID-19 across 16 countries. There have been at least 282 recoveries in that region. Here is CGTN's correspondent Phil Ihaza in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, to give us an update on the West African region and how some countries there are tackling the outbreak.
Thanks, Hannah. In the West African region, all 16 countries have confirmed cases of coronavirus. Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, Senegal and Ghana with the highest burden of the disease. And these countries have all declared a state of emergency, imposed curfews, as well as closed their borders to travelers from high-risk countries, all in a bid to curtail the spread of coronavirus. In Nigeria, for instance, several states, including the capital Abuja, where I'm reporting from, residents are in their second-week lockdown with a wide security presence to enforce compliance. Some essential workers like food vendors and health officials are exempt. In Ghana, President Nana Akufo-Addo announced on Monday that his government will pay people's water bills for the next 3 months and has urged utility companies to ensure consistent supply of water and electricity throughout the period of a 2-week lockdown, which also began last week. Likewise, in Nigeria, the government has embarked on food distribution and cash transfers to some low-income earners to cushion the effect of the lockdown. But a major concern, Hannah, is the fact that the WHO says most countries in the region don't have enough doctors and hospital beds for their population. And to help tackle this, we've seen a lot of interventions and donations from medical facilities, from private bodies and international organizations, as well as funds from governments, all geared towards helping to boost the health sector, contain the spread and manage the cases. Now, the hope is that these efforts will pay off and that there will be more collaboration between countries in the West African region to halt the spread of COVID-19. It's back to you, Hannah.
Well, CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy now looks at some of the measures countries in East Africa have taken to control the spread of the virus.
Well, thank you very much, Anna. Yes, indeed, East Africa is one of the regions that is struggling to contain the spread of the coronavirus. And we have also seen positive measures by countries within this region to ensure that no further confirmed cases are recorded in their particular territory or boundary. We have seen Rwanda and Uganda imposing a total lockdown. And this total lockdown aims at ensuring that no further cases are recorded in these countries. The two East African countries have also gone ahead to ensure that food is distributed to the vulnerable people that need this food at this particular time. But some of the cases, if we can run through very briefly, is that Uganda has so far recorded 52 confirmed cases, Rwanda with 104 cases, Tanzania with 22, and South Sudan with 1 case. So there is a ray of hope that maybe sooner or later this virus may be contained by our countries. But as it is, it's still a pandemic, just like it was announced by the World Health Organization, and countries are ensuring that they do all it takes to make sure that they wipe this virus out of their boundaries. But that is what East African countries are doing right now. And of course, many other countries within the East African region, for instance, Kenya, have come out with precautionary measures to the citizens, telling people to stay in their homes. And this is one of the ways that governments within this region think will help in the fight against the spread of this virus. But as we speak for now, countries continue to struggle, but we do hope for the best. Thank you very much, and back to you.
Well, the Democratic Republic of Congo is ready to take part in vaccine trials against COVID-19. The task force against the new coronavirus says the country has been chosen to conduct the test by foreign experts. And as CGTN's Chris Maringo reports, the move has sparked an uproar across the DRC.
The coronavirus pandemic has affected the DRC capital and 3 other provinces in the east of the country. Authorities have been struggling to contain the disease with limited equipment and facilities. But the head of the task force against COVID-19 says the country is now prepared to conduct tests of a vaccine. Professor Jean-Jacques Muyembe says the country was chosen to conduct the tests that could begin in July or August this year. However, his remarks have attracted sharp criticism from many Congolese citizens.
There are many people who are dying of coronavirus in Europe, but they want to test that famous vaccine of theirs here in our country. That means we are going to be used as guinea pigs. It's wrong.
This backlash prompted the head of the task force to clarify that Congolese will not be used as guinea pigs in the trials. Social media users have also criticized two French medical professionals for discussing the testing of COVID-19 vaccines in Africa. The DRC government has announced a state of emergency and imposed a lockdown in Kinshasa's central business district to limit the spread of the disease. Chris Sochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
South Africa is working around the clock to secure protective gear to fight COVID-19. A surge in global demand since the outbreak has disrupted medical supply chains. African countries are now finding it difficult to procure stock. South Africa has close to 1,600 cases and has reported almost a dozen COVID-19 related deaths. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
South Africa's doctors and nurses are preparing for the worst. As the number of COVID-19 cases surge, ventilators, protective suits, masks and gloves are becoming scarce and more expensive.
All the doctors are very keen to help, to get involved and to be on the front line, but we are not prepared to sacrifice our own safety. Surgical masks like the one I'm wearing have increased about 20-fold in price, from 1 Rand a unit to 20 Rand a unit. The fancy masks that we would like to wear, N95 or FFP2, have increased 10-fold in price.
We haven't as yet, as a country, run out, but there are provinces and facilities that definitely do not have equipment. So we are estimating that for every COVID-19 positive patient that is treated per day by a team of people, you would need something like 14 to 20 sets of personal protective equipment.
Personal protective equipment shortages and price hikes are leaving doctors, nurses and other frontline workers feeling vulnerable, and we need them healthy now more than ever.
I think we're just appealing for the general public and big businesses to help us with protective equipment, because it's quite hard as doctors to try and source it and do all the ministerial jobs of trying to find people who'll sell it at a good price, and it's taking a lot of our time, frankly, which we don't have.
Civil society and businesses have responded to the call and stepped in.
We started a fundraising effort appealing to friends, family, businesses who we knew, and it was extraordinary. Bonnie from Heavenly Feathers stepped up and started making masks for us. We managed to raise $15,000 and we've been able to donate over 500 sets of scrubs and masks to various clinics and hospitals around Gauteng. So it's been incredible to see how people have responded.
The government is working with businesses to address the shortage, but it will have to work quickly to protect its frontline workers. Judy Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
We're staying in South Africa, where Gauteng province is struggling to cope with the high numbers of homeless people. People living on the street have been moved to temporary shelters to protect them against COVID-19. The move is in line with President Cyril Ramaphosa's directive. CGTN's Julie Shire brings us that story.
It was a scramble to find shelters for tens of thousands living on the streets. The public donations of money and food dried up when South Africa's 21-day quarantine started. Provisions have been made for homeless people, but many are still on the streets, surviving on the little that they can find, while most South Africans are locked indoors.
I don't have a place where can I sleep, like during the day. If I've got a place, I can sleep. So I sleep even at the park or on the spa.
As winter rolls in, social workers fear the homeless population will be at a higher risk of contracting COVID-19.
They always got perennial coughs because they get cold on the street. We're heading into winter, so we're heading into the flu season with pneumonia and everything else that's likely to happen. You know, if you're on the streets, you're likely to take to alcohol or drugs, so that also further decreases your immune system.
In Pretoria, more than 2,000 were forcibly taken off the streets and crowded into a stadium without enough food, tents or toilets.
We don't have even the right precautions to follow. There's no self-distancing. We have not even been given sanitizers. We don't know anything. The food that we are eating is below the standards that we are even at the streets when I'm digging inside of the dustbin.
This thing, they say it's a virus, that corona thing. But we never bath, 8 days, no bathing, no gloves, no mask. What if one person is sick here? We're going to be sick, all of us. All of us. And we never even got tested for this virus. It was better when we were sleeping in the street, because in the street we don't sleep with so many people.
We've been kidnapped here. We've been kidnapped here. They are bringing us those blankets that they cover furnitures for. These blankets are for furnitures. It's not for the human being. If you can inhale these things that are coming here, we are already sick.
Authorities say they are trying to cope with larger than expected numbers.
For now, we've given them temporary accommodation. What we've done, we've established a center where they're screened first, and on the basis of the nature of their health, then we distribute them to various centers. But we've got temporary shelters, we've got permanent shelters. We're looking at the backup being schools and churches.
The goal is to keep the homeless safe from COVID-19, but so far no one here has been tested, and the plan of being moved to shelters is taking too long. Julie Shara, CGTN, Pretoria, South Africa.
We go to Egypt now, where the country has postponed all national projects to be completed this year to next year due to the pandemic. The projects put on hold include the Grand Egyptian Museum and the relocation of civil servants to the new capital city. CGTN's Adela Muruki tells us more.
For years, President El-Sisi has been very passionate about elaborating how Egyptian projects were completed ahead of schedule. Construction in all mega projects continued 24/7. No crisis the country faced has managed to stop that progress until COVID-19 hit.
We're on the verge of entering the most dangerous phase of the COVID-19 pandemic, the third phase of the outbreak. It has restrictions on the number of people working together, even in outdoor projects. Infrastructure consumes a lot of manpower. Egypt employs multiples of the usual numbers because of the tight schedule.
This week, El-Sisi has postponed the inauguration of all projects scheduled this year to 2021. The decision affects Egypt's biggest national dreams, which includes moving the government to the new administrative capital, earlier set for June, and the opening of the Grand Egyptian Museum, which Cairo hoped the world would attend in December. Construction projects will resume on Monday for the first time since Egypt reported COVID-19 cases, but with restrictions.
Construction will resume slowly and under strict preventive measures. There will be disinfective gates to project sites. All workforce 55 and above or those with chronic diseases will not be permitted. Egypt is in a struggle to protect the economy and keep infections from spreading. Egypt doesn't have the luxury that its economy completely stops.
Only projects isolated from residential life will be allowed to resume. And with the given preventive measures, most construction sites might not be able to meet their new deadlines. And while Egypt doesn't know how long the impact of COVID-19 will last, this might not be the last delay in Egypt's national projects. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has tweeted that he is in good health. He's keeping in touch with the cabinet over the pandemic. However, he remains in hospital for tests following 10 days of persistent COVID-19 symptoms, including a high fever. Prime Minister Johnson was admitted to St. Thomas Hospital on Sunday, with Downing Street calling it a precautionary measure. Meanwhile, Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab has been tapped to temporarily chair the government's daily COVID-19 meetings. Johnson's colleagues have clarified, though, that the Prime Minister is still in charge of government. His admission to hospital comes after Queen Elizabeth delivered a rare emergency address urging Britain to, and I quote, remain united and resolute amid the pandemic. When a lockdown on Wuhan was declared 11 weeks ago to contain COVID-19, the move was considered harsh and unprecedented. Now lockdowns in many parts of the world have become the norm. In 2 days, the world will see the lockdown on Wuhan lifted. We take a look at how this city is preparing for the day it's long been waiting for. Wang Siwen tells us more.
There's a new spirit around in Wuhan among many who've survived the coronavirus. They've emerged stronger and more optimistic.
最大的愿望是好好的享受人生吧，真的好好享受人生。
And for many people in Wuhan, that's translating into a new enthusiasm for the culinary and consumer pleasures the city has to offer. After 2 months of epidemic fear, life is starting to return to the streets. Many are getting their energy back with the taste of their favorite treats.
武汉那边的面是最香的，最香的，跟以往更香。
我们老武汉人的话，我最好的这一口那个面。
我们到那个初一就出去到医院去工作，到现在2个多月没有吃了嘛。我们刚回来的时候，第一碗吃的，我觉得比原来吃的，我感觉因为可能是时间太长了吧。反正第一碗。
As people stayed at home amid the outbreak, delivery services saw their orders surging. Now, with people being able to make purchases on their own, one of the riders actually feels relieved to be left idle.
I haven't seen such orders online for half a month. Many shops are open. I think this is good. Things are going back to normal.
Shopping activities also begin to revive, with shopping malls recently reopened.
化妆品啊什么的，这2个月基本上也没有余粮了。
I have no more cosmetics left at home. It's getting warm. I've come for sun care products.
Elsewhere, on Wuhan's railway system, preparations are underway for a massive resumption of operations. The city is scheduled to lift its lockdown on Wednesday this week. In due course, the transportation hub will also start to restore many of its domestic flight services.
We've checked the whole terminal building to make sure the equipment is functioning normally.
In the city's Optics Valley, one of the high-tech centers of the nation, high-end manufacturing companies are close to their full capacity. Government measures such as cost rebates and rent reductions are on the way to help businesses get back to their place on the industrial chain as soon as possible. Wang Sun, CGTN.
Well, wearing a face mask does not guarantee that a person will not get sick, but masks are effective at capturing droplets, which are the main transmission route of COVID-19. Some studies estimate that 5-fold protection while wearing a mask versus no barrier alone. Earlier, we spoke to Dr. Tom Kirengo, who is a managing director at Imara Mediplus Hospital here in Kenya, to tell us more.
This is a surgical mask. This is an N95 mask. And this is a homemade mask. So the most important thing with wearing a mask, I'll illustrate using the homemade mask, is that you should have a really proper snug fit with your mask, starting with the nose. So on this homemade mask that I have, it has a metallic brace on the nose that helps it fit there. So you push it, and then you tie it on the back. I know my voice is going to get a bit low because of the mask itself, but you should ensure you have a nice tight fit, both at the top and at the bottom. We just thought that we have to do something because we have our staff who are frontline facing patients daily, and they needed to have something to protect them. So we went online, did some research, and we developed this three-layered mask. So it has the front cover, it has another layer over here, and it has a pouch. Now on the pouch, the pocket, we put in a filter. So the other challenge was, what do we use as a filter? Because essentially what we should be using is hospital-grade microfiber filter. However, we couldn't get that because first and foremost, they're not made in Kenya. Second, with the shortage of supplies in the supply chain, we just couldn't find them. So we researched on what we could use as an alternative and started using sanitary pads. So what I have over here actually is a sanitary pad. Just a regular sanitary pad. We got the thinnest one we could get from the supermarket. Did a bit of research how much filtration we can achieve from the sanitary pad. So it's easy to access, it's cheap, it's disposable. So it's basically you have a mask that has reusable parts. On top of that, you can wash. What we're advising is use cotton. So the highest grade cotton you can get is 100% cotton, which is very expensive and difficult to find. On top of that, have at least 2 layers of the cotton. Like we're using 3 layers, but have at least 2 layers. And if you can have a pocket where you can put in a filter. So other things that you can use as a filter is an actual surgical mask. So you can take your surgical mask and put it inside of the pocket and use it as your filter. So in which case, a surgical mask that you would use for maybe one day only, you can reuse it. Because what I'm seeing is a lot of people are reusing surgical masks, and the mask is exposed. It's exposed to dirt. Usually, the surgical masks are supposed to be disposed after using them for an hour or 2. So if you put them as a filter, it gives you a bit more time to use your surgical mask.
Well, it's time now for us to take a short break and return. More news, including Uganda battling a new swarm of locusts from Kenya, and Sudan peace parties resume peace talks in Juba.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. You're watching news making headlines right here on Africa Live. Well, Uganda is battling a new swarm of locusts from Kenya. Pest controllers say 3 swarms have crossed into Uganda through the country's northeastern district of Amudat in the last few days. The country's army is now beefing up efforts to control the migratory insects. CGTN's Hilaria Yesiga reports.
Hoppers continue to make their way into Uganda. This is the second invasion of locusts in a period of 3 months. Pest controllers are worried that the latest swarm could even be more destructive.
The new invasion is more scaring because unlike the previous one where they were very old and mature, having traveled all the way from Somalia, from Ethiopia, but this time we are scared that this could be younger, immature adults which are very feeding, and this being the beginning of the planting season. If we don't control them thoroughly, they can be a very big problem to the country. So that's why we are not taking any chances, and we have to ensure that whatever comes in is thoroughly controlled and beaten off.
Uganda has deployed the army to help control the locusts. They are using hand spray pumps and aerial spraying. They plan to boost these efforts with more aircraft.
We are trying to make more clearances to ensure that this aircraft comes in tomorrow and it boosts the ground control efforts which are being done by the UPDF. Because at times the UPDF has a limitation because these locusts tend to be high up in the bushes, and those are the types we shall be looking up when we are applying the area control method.
They have also put in place a mechanism to intercept swarms coming into Uganda. Pest controllers are hopeful that these measures can stop the plague. Hilaria Yesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
A gun attack in a mining area in the Democratic Republic of Congo has killed 3 Chinese nationals. The Chinese embassy in the African country says the attack took place on Saturday in the northeastern province of Ituri. The province is between the Uganda and South Sudan borders. The Chinese embassy has asked the Congolese government to take effective measures to protect the lives and property of Chinese citizens. The DRC is the world's biggest producer of cobalt and copper. This has attracted billions of dollars in investment despite the security risks. Let's go to Libya now, where a military plane belonging to the Eastern Libyan forces has been hit by forces allied to the internationally recognized government. The Libyan National Army says that the plane was carrying medical supplies to fight the COVID-19 outbreak, while Tripoli forces say it had been carrying ammunition. The incident took place in Taruna, a town south of Tripoli. The Libyan National Army, commanded by Khalifa Haftar, has been trying to take Tripoli for a year. Well, peace talks meant to end violence in Sudan have resumed in Juba after being suspended for a week following the death of Sudan's defense minister. The mediators say negotiations will continue, but without face-to-face meetings, to try and prevent the spread of coronavirus. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
A coalition of 9 rebel groups and Khartoum representatives are continuing with talks to try to find lasting peace in Sudan. Sudan's transitional government says ending conflict in the country is its priority. South Sudan is mediating in the talks. The mediators say there will be no face-to-face meetings as a measure to avoid the spread of the COVID-19. It says it is using video conferencing technology to try and push the peace process forward.
We have organized the talks in such a way that the Sudan's government delegation will be in Khartoum. The opposition parties are here in Juba. Communication will be done electronically. We will also have Skype conference calls with the parties.
The peace process has brought together all political and military groups that fought the regime of the former President Omar al-Bashir. So far, the parties have agreed on a ceasefire, humanitarian access, land issues, and the resettlement of those displaced by the conflicts. Sudan's peace talks began in South Sudan in October last year, aiming to end conflicts in Darfur, Blue Nile, and Southern Kordofan, and ensure a halt to violence in the country. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Well, still in South Sudan, 8 agencies running rehabilitation centers that support landmine victims say they'll stop operations to avoid the spread of the coronavirus. The move leaves beneficiaries of the centers with an uncertain future. People in South Sudan face danger from many mines left in the ground during the country's civil war. CGTN's Patrick Oyet brings us more.
Yokwes Deng was hit by a landmine in 2011 as she was walking to her neighbor's house. The mother of 2 lost her legs. She has since suffered from depression. It is only this rehabilitation center that has given her hope.
February of every year, I come to this center to get a replacement for my artificial leg. I'm now doing business, selling tea in the market, and I'm also taking care of my children thanks to this artificial leg.
The United Nations Mine Action Service, or UNMAS, in South Sudan says it has so far destroyed more than 1 million explosive devices and 4.2 million bullets. The UN says it will take many years to complete the removal of landmines and other unexploded ordnances. Landmine victims are found across South Sudan. South Sudan has only 3 rehabilitation centers supported by International Committee of the Red Cross that produce artificial limbs and support landmine victims. The 6-year civil war, which ended in February this year, halted the mining in most parts of South Sudan. That led to the maiming of more people.
The number of the patients are on rise. So mainly because we have different causes of amputations, and beside the amputations also we have like traumatic cases. We have the gunshot, which is really the biggest number within, and we have the landmine.
The International Committee of the Red Cross says its operations to support landmine victims are being hampered by measures to contain the coronavirus.
Due to the coronavirus, now we have stopped bringing patients from other centers because we are avoiding the crowded. So we are trying by any means, those who have already been in the center, we are trying by any means to send them back. And that is why our technicians, they are very busy this time in order to finish with the devices of the patient so that they can be booked to go back.
The partial lockdown in South Sudan has denied many landmine victims access to rehabilitation centers. Yokwes Deng is from the northern part of South Sudan. She is now stuck in Juba until the partial lockdown is lifted. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Well, I'll be standing by to bring you more news. But for now, let's take a look at what's happening in the world of business with Rama.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in business news. The global oil prices fall as OPEC Plus is chasing a deal. And we'll take you to a Nigerian pet shop that has seen a boom in rabbit sales during the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's start in the world of commodities. Oil prices slipped by more than $1 a barrel on Monday. This comes after the world's top producers delayed a meeting to discuss output cuts that could partly alleviate the oversupply in global markets at the moment, even as the coronavirus pandemic hammers demand. Brent crude slipped close to $30 a barrel in early trade. It was at $32.82 earlier on, down $1.29, about 3.8%. WTI crude was also down by $1.68 to $26.68 a barrel after touching a low of $25.28 earlier in the session. Now, late last week, prices did surge, with US and Brent contracts posting the largest ever weekly percentage gains, and that was mostly due to hopes that OPEC and its allies, particularly Russia, would strike a deal of some sort to cut crude supply worldwide by at least 10 million barrels a day. A study by the African Union shows that roughly 20 million jobs are at risk in Africa as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. Most of the continent's economies are forecast to shrink this year due to this pandemic. Before the pandemic, continent-wide GDP growth had been forecast by the African Development Bank to reach about 3.4% on average. And what the AU deems as their realistic scenario, however, they expect a contraction of about 0.8%. The pessimistic scenario, however, forecasts a contraction of 1.1%. Up to 15% of foreign direct investments could disappear. In the meantime, the impact on employment will be pretty dramatic, as African governments are losing up to 20 to 30% of their fiscal revenue. Now, African economies are already facing an impending global economic downturn, plummeting oil and commodity prices, and an imploding tourism sector. Now, speaking of tourism, airfares on domestic routes have fallen significantly in the wake of reduced travel following the coronavirus outbreak in Kenya. One-way fares, for example, from Kisumu, which is on the shores of Lake Victoria, and Mombasa from the capital, Nairobi, have fallen essentially by more than half to a low of $33 on peak days. For context, the lowest ticket prices have sunk is that level. Carriers like Kenya Airways and its budget subsidiary Jambojet have grounded their aircraft, and they've also cut frequencies to save costs amid reduced passenger numbers. This follows travel restrictions imposed by the government. Fares on other routes rarely fall below $75 on peak days. The recent declines, however, have seen SafariLink and Air Kenya both suspend operations until the 1st of June. Now, on an ordinary day, Uganda's capital, Kampala, teems with life and heavy traffic, including the famous or infamous, depending on your perspective, border taxis that make it nearly impossible to move around. But since the coronavirus-induced lockdown, Kampala is in limbo and oddly quiet. Here's Isabel Nakiria with the details.
This used to be one of the most busy bus stages in the capital, the City Square stage as it's commonly called. It was crowded with hundreds of passengers boarding buses to the suburbs of Kampala. It's now quiet and empty after the ban on public transport and the stay-at-home order by the government. The shopping malls and businesses remain closed. Traders are not allowed to hang around town. People can move around on foot, but not gather in groups. And by 7 p.m., everyone is supposed to be home. That's when the curfew hour begins and ends at 6 a.m. in the morning. The enforcement of the coronavirus lockdown has totally changed people's way of life in Kampala. A city that used to bustle with around 1.7 million people is now quiet. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
The South African arm of British American Tobacco, BAT, is urging the government to reconsider its ban on cigarette sales during the nationwide lockdown. South Africa has imposed some of the toughest anti-pandemic measures on the continent. That includes a 21-day stay-at-home lockdown that started more than a week ago. During that period of time, essential services retailers and petrol station forecourt stores are not allowed to sell alcohol or cigarettes. Now, the government has justified the ban on studies showing that smoking can make people more susceptible to serious complications arising from being infected by COVID-19. BATSA said it supported the decisive measures being taken by the government, but it says that the ban on cigarette sales could jeopardize the fight, in its view, to contain the virus. Now, from foreign trade to manufacturing, industries right across the world are being hit pretty hard by COVID-19. That also includes niche markets like manufacturing bicycles. CGTN's Omar Khan caught up with one American industry leader to hear how they are trying to weather the storm.
Here at this folding bike factory in southern China's Guangdong province, assembly line staff are back to work. The factory belongs to Dahan, a global leader in folding bike technology headquartered in California. And much like many other factories and warehouses, the past 3 months have been difficult, though a recent recovery has brought back a sense of stability.
Overall, since work resumed and up to now, our workforce has been quite stable. The local and district committees carry out regular checks and we also maintain strict requirements on prevention controls. It hasn't really affected our foreign and domestic orders. It hasn't had a big impact on us.
With nearly 40 years of experience and having become the world's top designer and producer of foldable bikes, Dahan has built up a sustainable business. But in the times of a pandemic, it seems that no industry would be completely spared from the economic impacts.
Well, almost all of China was locked down. So that includes our suppliers and ourselves. Nothing can be done for more than 2 months, almost 3 months. The factory, beginning with maybe half the staff, and then increasing now to about maybe 80% of the staff. So we are getting back to normal probably by the end of next month.
And on the financial side of things, the pains were felt as well, with the company suffering sizable losses.
I think we suffered between everything, maybe 10-15 million RMB.
But even despite operational and financial obstacles, Dahan has seen an overwhelmingly positive rebound. It's perhaps a credit to their ability to set industry standards and develop cutting-edge technology.
Our business has picked up a lot in the month of March. So especially in online sales, more than 50%. Okay. Offline, we are still higher than last year, same period.
Maintaining a positive yet realistic outlook is something Han says he'll keep doing, and there's a lot to look forward to. In recent years, the company has developed partnership programs that have enabled other manufacturers to co-brand, share patented technology, and work in tandem. But before all of that gets back on track, getting through the current situation remains a top priority. Omar Khan, CGTN, Shenzhen.
Now, Egypt and Sudan's electricity grids were formally connected on Friday with an initial generation capacity of 60 megawatts deployed to service that link. Now, the extension of the grid into Sudan's northern regions was completed with testing as part of the efforts to expand the country's grid supply. The line was completed in April last year with a length of 100 kilometers in Egypt and another 70 kilometers in Sudan. The first phase of this link aims to provide Sudan with a capacity of up to 70 megawatts of generation capacity. And that should eventually scale up to about 300 in the second phase after some upgrade of some Sudanese power stations. Egypt has rapidly expanded its power generation capacity in recent years, and it has been looking to export surplus supply to neighboring states. On to Nigeria now. Businesses around the world are really being hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. In Nigeria, many establishments remain closed as a lockdown imposed by the government takes effect. But one company says business in bunnies is booming. A pet shop is seeing its business thrive as people look for company during the lockdown in Africa's largest city of Lagos. CGTN's Alexander Majala takes up that story.
27-year-old Sandra Dozier works as a Nigerian oil merchant. The closure of her workplace weeks ago saw her purchase a bunny from an online pet store.
My family and I got bored of just being just us at home. We wanted someone that would be there to, play with and just mess around with.
While many businesses in Nigeria are closed due to the outbreak of the new coronavirus, the pet business is booming. Sales have peaked for online businesses as demand for pet companionship skyrocketed during the global pandemic now threatening Lagos, Africa's most populated city.
Just like the FMC goods, you have your season. I can say the present situation had given rabbitry its season of sales. The increase is much because people want to stay with something they can reckon with. The rabbit, being an intelligent animal, fits in this space.
All businesses. On March 29th, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari announced the ban of movement in Lagos and the country's capital Abuja for 14 days in an attempt to curb the spread of the coronavirus. Health experts are concerned about a potential widespread outbreak in Nigeria, which has a population of over 200 million people and a poor public health system. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
And I'll leave you there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour, though. In global business, we'll be looking at the job side of the COVID-19 pandemic. 20 million Africans set to lose their jobs essentially as a direct result of this pandemic. But how much worse could it really get? We'll explore that and plenty more at 1800 GMT. See you then. For now, back to Hannah.
We're looking forward to all of that, Rama. Thank you so much. For now, let's take a short break and return. News making headlines in the world of sport, including martial artist Temba Gorimbo remains optimistic despite gloomy coronavirus pandemic situation.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player?